Well, hello guys. Welcome back to another Sunday. This will be our first one in December, and as many of you know, we are quickly approaching Christmas. Yeah, I'm very excited about Christmas. My family has a tradition that we do every Christmas. When we get together, before we open presents, we read, or one of us reads through Luke chapter 2. It's just kind of it's a thing that we do. And it reminds us of, really why we're there. It was the gift of Jesus' birth into the world. And well, today we're going to be reading about the death of Jesus. And so, Christmas is the celebration of his birth and the fact that God came down to earth as a man. And what we're reading today is a reminder of why he came and what he accomplished while he was here. Now, I'm sure some of you guys have seen, like fantasy movies or like supernatural movies where, there's some kind of like a spooky thing going on, and the main characters, whoever they are, they're somewhere and there's candles around or something, and to kind of like symbolize the spookiness or like the presence of the supernatural, like the candles will just magically snuff out, or sometimes the flip side is true, where they're in a dark room and all of a sudden like candles randomly light, they spontaneously combust, and like there's just fire there. Sometimes there's an earthquake involved. Sometimes there's just a mystical wind blowing through. But there's those signs of the supernatural. Well, what we're going to read today is going to give us some of those signs as we read about the death of Jesus. So today's passage is Matthew chapter 27, and we're going to be reading from verses 45 to 56. So it's not too long of a passage, but this might be one of the most important passages that we could ever read. So let's get right into it. So it starts off, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. And so we have this passage depicting the death of Jesus. Some quick notes that you guys might be interested to know. So when it says from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness, to us, if we're thinking like, 6 to 9, 6 p.m., 9 p.m., especially now in the wintertime, like it's already dark. Not that abnormal. But the 6th hour, in the way that the Jews kind of kept track of time, that was noon. Like they started the day at 6, so the 6th hour past 6 would be 12, that's noon. So that was midday to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was darkness covering the land. So that's supernatural event number 1. And that's while he's on the cross. That's not even at the point that he dies. So then later, when he cries out in a loud voice for a second time and gives up his spirit, there's a couple things that happen at that exact moment. The first one is the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, earlier I brought up the tradition that my family does. We read Luke chapter 2. But if you go back and you read Luke chapter 1, that is where the birth of John the Baptist is kind of predicted or prophesied. An angel appears to the chief priest, or his name is Zechariah, and declares to him, "Hey, your prayers have been answered. You're going to have a son, and he's going to be this awesome guy." And Zechariah doesn't really believe him, so he's struck mute, and like there's a whole ordeal that goes on there. But the thing I want to note is where he gets this prophecy. So Zechariah goes into the Holy of Holies, the innermost part of the temple of God. And this is the place where God's Spirit rested. It's where God was physically on earth. Like if you needed to find a pinpointed spot, like this is where God is, that was the spot, was in that room. And there was this heavy curtain that separated that inner room from the rest of the temple and basically the rest of the world. So that curtain stood between God and mankind. It was a symbol of the separation that was there. Like men could not be in the presence of God. There was a separation. And once a year, the high priest, the chief priest, or whoever was casted the lot to go in, would go in there and burn incense. And what they actually did was they would tie a rope around his ankle that led outside. Because if he did anything wrong while he was in there, God's Spirit would strike him dead. And so they didn't want to just have a rotting body stuck inside the Holy of Holies because no one else could go in there for a year. So they had the rope tied around there so that if he did die, they could pull him out. It's a little comical side note, but that's something that they really did. Well, that curtain, which separated the innermost Holy of Holies, the presence of God, from the rest of mankind, at the point of Jesus' death, that curtain ripped from top to bottom. And part of the reason that's significant for the top to bottom part is that it means that it wasn't like somebody went in there, took the bottom of the thing and ripped it open. It wasn't a person who did this. Top to bottom meant that it had to be God who ripped it in half. It wasn't a person. And so there's supernatural event number one. There's no longer any kind of separation between God and mankind. What Jesus' death did was it brought reconciliation. It connected us. It gave us opportunity to be in relationship with God again. We were no longer just stuck being separated. We also see that the earth shook and rocks split in half. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever gone on a hike, but I know that I would be completely freaked out if rocks just started splitting in half randomly. That would be freaky. And that's what happens when Jesus dies. Rocks split. There's a massive earthquake. The centurion notices and they see the earthquake and the results of all these things. And their natural response is, Jesus was the Son of God. There's no other explanation for these supernatural phenomena that are happening as a result of his death. And then the most interesting part that people often will just kind of skip over because they don't want to talk about it is that the tombs broke open and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. And they came out of the tombs, and after Jesus resurrected, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. And so it wasn't just Jesus who came back to life 3 days after this. There were other holy people who came back to life and paraded themselves around the city so that people saw them. Jesus' death is a life-bringing moment. His death brings life. That's the symbolism here. And then it goes on to talk about the fact that there were women there, and they'll come into play a little bit later in the passage as we get into some more in the coming weeks. But the main thing I really wanted to focus on here was the death of Jesus is possibly one of the most important events of human history. When Adam and Eve sinned at the beginning, they brought sin and death into the world, and it separated man from God. And there was nothing we could do to get past that. And when Jesus died, as it said, the curtain in the temple was torn in two, and that symbolized the fact that now, because of what Jesus did on the cross, because of the sin that he took on and paid for, we are no longer separated from God. We are no longer separated from God. Just let that sink in. We are no longer separated from God. Through Jesus Christ, our sins are forgiven, and we can have a relationship with God. That's all I want you guys to take away from this passage. And if it takes a week, a month, a year for that to really sink in and hit you, so be it. When Jesus died, we gained access to God. That is the significance of the death of Jesus. His resurrection proved that, who he said he was who he really was. But it was his death that paid the penalty for our sins. He took that on for us so that we could have salvation, so that we could have access to God. And that is all I want you guys to be thinking about for the rest of this week. We can have a relationship with God. See ya.